The modern global economy was built on the ashes of the Second World War. By 1945, the conflict had claimed between 75 and 80 million lives. This chart shows the distribution of World War II deaths. Notice the enormous bars for the Soviet Union and China, representing staggering casualties that dwarf the relatively smaller losses of the United States. Beyond the human toll, the physical machinery of global trade was broken. Major financial centers across Europe, like London, were reduced to rubble. The destruction extended across the Pacific. Japan's manufacturing base and export capacity were entirely annihilated. In contrast, the United States emerged with its infrastructure intact. More importantly, the U.S. held the vast majority of the world's monetary gold, locked away. This extreme imbalance created an immediate crisis, known as the dollar shortage. Europe and Japan needed American imports, but they lacked the dollars to pay for them. Without dollars flowing abroad, the fixed exchange rate system established at Bretton Woods could not function. The United States chose a deliberate strategy: flood the global economy with American currency. Through the Marshall Plan, the U.S. pumped $13 billion in grants and loans directly into European recovery between 1948 and 1952. This table breaks down that Marshall Plan aid. You can see the heavy concentrations directed toward the United Kingdom, France, and West Germany to jumpstart their economies. The strategy worked. Because these nations needed dollars to trade, they held the injected funds as national reserves. By supplying the money, the United States made the U.S. dollar the global reserve currency. This initiated the heyday of the Bretton Woods system. From 1959 to 1967, fixed exchange rates disciplined monetary policy, resulting in low inflation, stable interest rates, and robust Western economic growth. But in 1959, an economist named Robert Triffin testified before Congress. He argued that this functioning system contained a fatal mathematical flaw. Triffin realized that the very mechanism used to save the post-war economy, distributing dollars, guaranteed the system's eventual destruction. To understand Triffin's logic, we must look at the unchangeable rule of the Bretton Woods machine. Every U.S. dollar was strictly pegged to gold at $35 an ounce. The physical constraint of this system was the total global monetary gold supply. It was virtually static, sitting at $2.8 billion. Outside of that fixed block of gold, international trade was expanding at over 6% every year. This requires liquidity. Liquidity is the availability of liquid assets, or cash, to a market or company to settle transactions. To facilitate an expanding volume of trade, the global economy required a growing supply of this international money. Because gold mining could not keep pace with global trade, the only way to inject the required liquidity into the system was for the United States to constantly export more paper dollars. This is the core macroeconomic contradiction. A rapidly growing global economy demands an ever-increasing supply of currency, but that currency is rigidly tethered to a finite physical commodity. How does the United States actually get those necessary dollars into foreign economies? It must run persistent trade deficits. The U.S. has to import more goods than it exports, paying the difference in dollars, while simultaneously sending currency abroad through military spending and foreign aid. The immediate result of these deficits is that foreign central banks, particularly in Japan and West Germany, accumulate growing stockpiles of U.S. dollars as their national reserves. This created the adjustment problem. In a typical environment, chronic trade imbalances naturally correct themselves, but under Bretton Woods, the adjustment mechanisms were paralyzed. Because exchange rates were fixed by international agreement, deficit nations could not simply devalue their currency to make exports cheaper and naturally rebalance their trade. The only other mathematical option to correct the deficit was domestic deflation, cutting wages and spending. But post-war democracies, heavily invested in the expanding welfare state, refused to sacrifice full employment for the sake of international balance. Domestic political priorities forced the U.S. to act as a relentless deficit engine. It pumped dollar liabilities into the global system continuously, with no structural way to correct imbalances. The problem with this persistent deficit engine comes back to the gold peg. Every single offshore dollar sitting in a foreign central bank was technically a legally binding claim on U.S. gold. You can see the mathematical contradiction building up. offshore dollar claims continue to pile up against a flat gold reserve. This left the United States with two impossible options. Option A, stop running deficits to protect the gold backing, but without a continuous supply of dollars, world trade starves, triggering global deflation. Option B, keep running deficits to supply the global liquidity needed to sustain economic growth, but issuing more currency guarantees that the total claims will eventually dwarf the gold supply. Eventually, the system hits a psychological tipping point. Foreign nations realize the math does not add up, and there isn't nearly enough gold in the vault to cover all the printed dollars. This is Robert Triffin's exact paradox. Supplying the necessary liquidity for global growth mathematically guarantees the erosion of confidence in the currency's backing. A reserve currency cannot satisfy both demands simultaneously. Triffin laid out this mathematical proof in 1959, and within 12 years, the historical data confirmed his prediction. The United States accelerated this structural collapse with its guns and butter policies of the 1960s. The government simultaneously funded the escalating Vietnam War and expansive Great Society social programs. Let's look at the actual data of U.S. monetary policy. To fund these expensive initiatives without aggressively raising taxes, the government had to print money. By 1960, the system reached a critical milestone. Total U.S. dollar liabilities officially exceeded the physical gold reserves held to back them. As the guns and butter spending intensified between 1965 and 1968, the supply of dollars surged, and foreign central banks began converting their holdings, causing the U.S. gold drain to accelerate. U.S. domestic policy choices turned a slow structural leak into severe hemorrhaging of the dollar's credibility. By 1971, the gap between outstanding liabilities and physical gold was unsustainable. The mathematical reality of the chart triggered a global run on the dollar. As surplus nations looked at the expanding gap, confidence evaporated. France directly challenged the United States. President Charles de Gaulle openly demanded that the U.S. honor the Bretton Woods Agreement and convert France's accumulated paper dollars into physical gold. The United States faced a grim reality. Relative to its global financial obligations, the national gold vault was functionally empty. By 1971, the system was stretched beyond its absolute limit. There was only 22 cents of physical gold backing every single U.S. dollar in circulation. Facing an unstoppable international run on its reserves, President Richard Nixon executed what became known as the Nixon shock. Unilaterally, the United States ended the convertibility of the dollar to gold. The collapse of the Bretton Woods system was the logical conclusion of its own rules. Triffin's derivation proved that a single national currency cannot act as a limitless global reserve while maintaining a finite commodity peg.